Hello and welcome back to How to Homeschool in High School, the podcast focused on encouraging and equipping you to homeschool through high school successfully, hosted by a high school teen. My name is Nadine Loffer, and on today's episode, we are talking with Mr. Nate Hartman, the founder and director of the National Christian School Athletic Association. Welcome to the 49th episode of How to Homeschool in High School. We are one away from 50. It is a big deal. This week is going to be a monumental, I will use that word today, monumental week in the life of the podcast for several reasons, and we'll get to it at the very, very end of this episode. But for now, we are talking with Mr. Nate Hartman, who is known to me as Coach Hartman. He's been my track and field coach for the past 3 years, and last season I did soccer for the first time, and he was also my soccer coach. So if you're new here, I was a homeschooled student for 8 years, and we did sports, and my sister currently does sports through a local co-op. You've probably heard this name talked about many different episodes throughout the life of this podcast. Plants and Pillars. Plants and Pillars is the co-op we use. They have a athletics program attached to the co-op, and that is how we've done sports for the past 3 years. It has been lovely. It has been wonderful. And Mr. Hartman, Coach Hartman, is one of the founding members of this athletics program. But that is not the only reason why I wanted to talk to him on the podcast today. The second reason is because he is the founder and director of an organization called the National Christian School Athletic Association. I'll call it NCSAA for short. But what it is it is an organization of almost, I think, 500 plus schools. And those are Christian schools. Those are also a homeschool co-ops. And every year they have these big athletic championships to end off each season. So they have a basketball one, a soccer one, volleyball, and track and field. I've only participated in the track and field championships, but let me tell you, they've been some of the highlights of my year. We had so many schools at the last championship meet. They come from all over the country to Pennsylvania and sometimes to Ohio to compete in these championships. And they're incredible and they're so fun. And I've talked to my friends about it, and they said it's literally their favorite event because as homeschoolers, we don't really get many opportunities like that. And it is because of people like Mr. Hartman, who dedicate so much of their life to creating organizations like NCSAA, that these opportunities are available to us. And we're going to talk about how you can get involved if you know a sports team or if you run a sports team that is looking to be involved in something like this. It is the perfect opportunity for you. But this is not just for parents who run athletic programs. This is also for students. He is my coach. We talk about building a thriving high school sports experience as a homeschooler. It is not only possible, it is literally happening every single day because of people like Mr. Hartman. So we're going to get into all of that, some of my experience personally as a Plants and Pillars athlete, and what it means to be a homeschooler and how that affects how we view sports. So it is a wonderful episode to listen to. I am so excited for you guys to hear it. Without further ado, let's just get right into it. So thank you so much for being with us today, Coach Hartman. And I've talked a lot about Plants and Pillars on the podcast before. So my listeners are pretty familiar with the sports program I use. But you have been my track coach for 3 years. And then I recently did soccer last season. So you were also my soccer coach. And then you're also the director of National Christian School Athletic Association. Is that right?
Yep, you got it right.
Perfect. And I've also talked about that too, especially with Kaylin last year when I interviewed her. But yeah, I'm really excited to hear how you started Plants and Pillars Athletics, how you guys got it started, and how you started the association as well. So if you want to start with just talking about your homeschooling experience, though, how did you guys get started homeschooling?
Man, it's almost hard to remember because we've been doing it for so long.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of it for us was wanting to have an education that was distinctly a Christian education.
Mm-hmm.
And also, both of us had a background in teaching. Both of us got degrees that were in teaching and had opportunities to teach in Christian schools. And so I think both of us felt like we were able to do different parts of the teaching. And I think we really wanted our kids to have not just a uniquely Christian education, but an education that wasn't just rote learning,
Hmm.
So um, again, we spent enough time teaching in schools to know that not everything that happens in a classroom seems very purposeful.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
so we really wanted to be able to tailor what our kids were doing education-wise to being purposeful. And I mean, just looking back on these years of homeschooling now, my wife especially has really loved these years of teaching our kids. And homeschooling offers a really unique opportunity to be in the lives of your kids and
Hmm.
to experience those years with them. And so it's been a big blessing to our family. I'm not sure that looking back on that decision to homeschool, I'm not sure that we understood all of the blessings that we would get through that
Yeah.
experience. So many of those things I think we learned along the way. And it certainly has been a blessing to be able to have that happen largely in our own home, to be able to have a deeper relationship with our kids through that experience too.
Yeah. I would agree. My mom, looking back at my dad as well, didn't understand fully how much homeschooling was going to bless us. And we obviously knew it was going to impact, our family connections and everything, but there's been so many more blessings that we had no idea were going to come from the process, that we've been so blessed by in our experience. But what did you guys know of homeschooling before you started? Did you have any experience with it?
Not really. All of our like my sister and her family and younger cousins. I mean, everybody was younger when we started homeschooling our
Mm,
first kid. She was the oldest in either of the sides of our family.
okay.
So it wasn't like we had other family that had done this. Obviously, we knew it existed.
Hmm.
Um, we had some idea that I think we felt like there were some positives to it. But so many people make the decision to homeschool um, because they decide they don't want to pay an expensive tuition to a school,
Hmm.
or they don't like the public school in their area and they're trying to avoid something about that. But that really wasn't our decision. Our decision was really based on we wanted a distinct Christian education for our kids that we could be a part of
Yeah.
in a bigger way. And so I think looking back on it, I think maybe our reasons for deciding in favor of homeschooling were good, but I'm
Hmm.
not sure. Like I said, I'm not sure we knew. We definitely didn't know what we were doing. We just thought
Yeah.
this seemed like a good option, and let's give it a try.
Hmm.
So it's been really God's blessing
Yeah.
on the decision.
Yeah, my mom, well, I'm bringing up my mom all the time, but she talks a lot about this. I guess it was, the deciding factor for homeschooling that was on her part. But she says that this is a way to honor God with our education. He will provide for us in ways we can't even imagine, really. When we moved up here, we had no idea that we would find plants and pillars and we'd be blessed through that. But we're honoring him with the education we give our children, the education my mom gave us. So he finds ways to provide for us, and it's just kind of fun to watch that happen too, to see him working through everything, to just give us that education that really does honor him.
Yeah, and I think I'm thankful in a lot of ways. I mean, I think one of the things we learned through this process is that God provides in every way.
Hmm.
And one of those ways is financially. I
Hmm.
think, um, we didn't make the, like I said, we didn't make the decision to homeschool just for a financial reason. And I think there are a lot of people who choose in favor of homeschooling for that reason. But I think God will honor a right decision
Hmm.
to teach your kids and bring them up in the knowledge of Him, regardless of what decision you make. So I think it's
Yeah.
been a blessing of homeschooling, but there are a lot of families who make those kinds of sacrifices for Christian education in a Christian school as well,
Yeah.
who make the decision to say Christian education is important to us. We want to pursue that. And we learn how to make the right kinds of sacrifices in our lives in order to make that happen. So I
Hmm.
think, as much as you talk about it and we talk about it and realize the blessing of homeschooling, I'm just thankful for families who make the commitment to Christian education, in
Exactly.
whatever form that is. I think God will provide and make that possible.
Hmm. That's a really good point too. It's homeschooling doesn't work for everyone, but choose a way of centering our education around him, no matter the different forms it takes, he will, provide for that. I love
Yep,
that too.
absolutely. We've seen that time and time again.
Hmm. Yeah. So, how'd you guys first get involved with the co-op plants and pillars?
Man, another almost impossible thing to remember how to answer. I'm getting too old. Uh, I think, again, I think our family was sort of one of the few that was involved in the beginning of
Okay.
that movement to start a co-op in this area. You know, there are various homeschooling co-ops around the area that families are able to take advantage of, slightly
Hmm.
different from each other in slightly different locations. But I know a handful of families sort of came together and again made that decision. We want to give our kids a Christian education. We're a few families that know each other and seem like we work well together and have some common goals for our kids and their education. And so I think, I mean, it started as a very small thing, as all of these things do, really, as all
Exactly.
Christian schools do.
Yeah.
Started as a very small thing in the area where just a few families came together and said, let's try to start getting together one day a week to just see each other, give an outlet for our kids to see each other, teach a class or two. And it's just grown, I mean, really between the co-op part of it and the athletics part of it has just grown astronomically
Hmm.
through these years. But it's been fun to see some of those same core families be involved all throughout the years of this, um, and also to see new families come in. I mean, that's just a part of the beauty of the building of a community.
Hmm.
And I'm not sure that most people who don't homeschool understand the beauty of a homeschooling community,
Yeah.
how strong a thing that is and how vibrant a thing that is. I think a lot of people have the perception that homeschooling is very isolated and you have a hard time having a social life or friendships and
Hmm.
those kinds of things. But man, it's just been beautiful to see how vibrant that homeschooling community has been and how much that has provided in terms of relationships and opportunities to connect and do things together for our kids. It's just been a really awesome thing over the years to see.
Hmm. For sure. And I think that that's a good point. The homeschooling community is a very unique community of families and students. I think it's fun to, I don't know, talk to other homeschoolers and hear about their communities. They're very similar, but they're different. It's just like this. I don't know. The homeschool family, though, the mindset that we have about education is so unique, and then connecting with others, people who have that same, like, we'll do it ourselves kind of thing, pushing through the hard parts of it because it is the harder path, I think, in a world where conventional schooling is just so easy to kind of get involved in.
It
Um,
is. I think it's a hard path in some ways, but then it's also there are so many things about this path that God blesses in a
mhm.
way that makes it easier.
Yeah,
There are a lot
yeah,
of, at least in my experience, there are a lot of things we haven't had to encounter or face or deal with because you have a little bit more
it's
choice,
true.
in your schooling option. And because the families, at least again, in our experience, the families that we've done this with have been such awesome families, it's made that a lot easier in some ways too. And
Mhm.
so there's a choice there that seems challenging, but as you get into it and begin to do it, you realize, oh, God has really blessed this and made this not as hard as we thought it was going to be.
Yeah. Yeah, that is true. It does seem more daunting at the front end. And then looking back now, especially because I just graduated and looking back, I realized that it became it wasn't as hard as we got into it, and it became normal in a rhythm, and we got in our community, and it just kept growing. Like then it became just wonderful. Majority of the hard things we just had to get through at the beginning because it can be challenging, especially when you start something and it has to grow. And right now, Plants and Pillars is at a really wonderful place. And I'm sure it started a much smaller and then it's just grown over the years. So that sometimes can take time to do. But how did the athletics start? Did it start very like close to when the co-op itself started?
It actually was quite a bit after the co-op,
Okay.
because our first daughter Esther started in the co-op when, I mean, again, as a kindergartner, as
Okay.
whatever, as we
Hmm.
began, that was her first schooling experience. But we didn't start the athletics portion of that until she was probably in about fifth grade or something like that. And we
Hmm.
just realized, well, honestly, how it really came about for a number of our families was we had kids that were about the age where they could start to potentially have a school sports opportunity.
Yeah.
I mean, they had played like youth soccer in some of the community leagues and things like that that are available to them. But you get to an age where it's like, well, this is the age that my kids would potentially play a sport at their school. And we don't have a school
Mm-hmm.
that has a sports program, you know? And so I think we just made a decision, our family and a few of the other families made a decision that we really wanted our kids to have that athletic experience. We had had that experience through schooling and our years growing up, and we realized the value in playing sports. And so we realized we wanted our kids to have that same opportunity, but we didn't want families to feel like they needed to choose against homeschooling because there was no sports program available to them. So we
Mm.
thought, look, there's nothing that prevents us from starting a sports program and starting teams. So we just started small. We started with like a third through fifth grade basketball team
Mm.
and junior high, I think it was junior high soccer team that we started with. Some of the blessing of starting those things at that point was I had had a background uh, because I had taught at a local Christian school. I had had a background with the local Christian school sports league
Okay.
that's around this area in the Pittsburgh area. So, and I had maintained relationships with the athletic directors in that league and had sort of been a little bit of an advisor in that league. And
Mm.
so, as we began to consider starting this homeschool sports program, I was able to get us involved in the youth basketball league that was a part of that league. And at least start to have the conversation with that league. Like, would you guys be open to having a homeschooling team as a part of the league?
Mm-hmm.
And so it was really great. I mean, I think there was like a natural outlet for us to have a connection with other schools that we could schedule games with, and we didn't have to start completely from scratch. uh, and yet the teams were very much started from scratch. I mean, we just had a bunch of kids out there who, soccer wise, had played a little bit in the local youth league, but basketball largely had a bunch of kids who had never played basketball
Mm-hmm.
before. And we were just, I mean, we had some coaches that knew how to coach things, and we were very blessed with that. But largely it was just trying to figure that out and find enough kids that wanted to play to
Yeah.
make sure that we had enough to start these different teams. But yeah, it was definitely a very much a ground level experience starting the athletic program.
No, I can only imagine. That sounds very daunting to start something like that.
And yet it was fun, you know,
Yeah.
because again, in the same nature of what homeschooling is, you're just out there with your kids playing sports, you
Yeah.
know. So in a sense, there wasn't any kind of a pressure of like, oh, we have to have competitive teams, or that really wasn't what it was about in the beginning. It
Mm-hmm.
was very much just, hey, let's go out with our kids and find a field and play some soccer. And then
Yeah.
if we can get some games scheduled with some other teams, then we'll do it a little more.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, really, all of the experiences early on were just very much it's parents out there doing it with their kids, and it's grown into a really beautiful thing.
Mhm. That's just an extension of the homeschooling experience
It
that they
really
had,
is. It really
which I
is. And
love.
that's, in fact,
Mhm.
that's why it's couched as Plants and Pillars. You know, I
Mhm.
mean, it's not like the Plants and Pillars families themselves said, let's start sports teams in our co-op.
Mhm.
It was very much just sort of like a group of families in the area that said, hey, there are a lot of homeschoolers in the area. We think this could be beneficial to a lot of people.
Mm.
And but it made sense when we thought, well, what are we going to call this? What's the name of this going to be? It made very much sense just to say, let's just call it Plants and Pillars, as long as the co-op's okay with it, because then it ties it to the co-op. It
Yeah.
gives the place, you know, for people to understand what is this thing instead of just giving it a general team name.
Yeah.
You know, so that I think that we're very blessed at that point that the co-op came alongside and said, yeah, let's formally couch this kind of as a part of the co-op, at least in name.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I've seen majority of the homeschool teams I've seen or people I've talked to who are join them. They have some sort of roots in a co-op or a group like a homeschooling group of sorts. I think Ignite homeschools like that. They have
Hmm.
their own co-op. So I just think that's interesting that just but it is really just find a group of homeschoolers and ask around if
It really
they
is.
want
And you
something.
never know.
Yeah.
Like we joke about, like, we know these homeschoolers are out there somewhere. We just don't know where they are. And the co-ops give a really nice place to be able to promote that. But then a lot of it just becomes word of mouth. You know, hey, I know a friend somewhere who'd like to play on this too. I know a friend that homeschools also. And it's been neat to see over the years the different families that have come in and become a part of this. And then again, just the beauty of how big and
Hmm.
vibrant a community that has created has been just beautiful.
Yeah. And that's how we found Plants and Pillars. It was, our community. It was like, hey, we're doing sports. You guys want to join us? And then we did more research and we're like, wow, this is really cool. So that's exactly how we found it. It was just word of mouth. That's why community is so important. Like, you need to have an outlet of sorts because you never know what opportunities are just going to be like passed through the grapevine. You would never know. So I love that about Plants and Pillars. And then how did the association kind of come from that?
Well, the associate, yeah, it's so weird. People, so people ask me about these things all the time. I tell
Yeah.
funny stories, because there are people who have been in our our Plants and Pillars co-op or Plants and Pillars athletic community. We host a 5K race in the fall, but it's not hosted by Plants and Pillars. It's hosted by NCSAA, National Christian School Athletic Association,
Hmm.
as kind of our big fundraising race and event in the fall each year. But people from our homeschool co-op have said, "Oh yeah." They've invited people to this race and then said, "Oh yeah, this is our fundraiser for our homeschool group." And I have to kind of say to them, "No, no, it's a
Not
different
really.
thing." But
Yeah.
they all look at me really confused, like, "What? It's all sports. What's the difference?"
Hmm. Yeah.
So it's actually just been a really cool thing. I mean, my passion, I was sort of ground level in starting the NCSAA. And my passion, I had taught in Christian schools for a good number of years
Hmm.
and had an opportunity to coach in Christian schools and had the experience growing up that athletics had been so beneficial to me in teaching me so many lessons. I had been discipled and mentored by a lot of great coaches who cared about me and taught me about leadership and just challenged me through sports in ways that never would have been possible in the classroom.
Yeah.
And I had such a great opportunity that, I thought, well, I want to coach. And so I did some of that in Christian schools. And uh, it was interesting. The start of NCSA happened right around the time of 9/11, uh,
Mm.
right up to September 11th. And I began to think after that time, I think as a lot of people did, uh, what's my direction and what's my purpose? Sometimes
Mhm.
those big times of calamity or tragedy are things that cause us to rethink our lives. And one of the things you heard a lot around that time is our culture needs to be closer to God.
Mm.
It's one of our problems. Our culture needs to be closer to God. And so I began to think a lot about what does that mean? And to me, that concept of a closeness with God and the role of the church in our culture
Mm.
challenged me to think about what is the church. And the church, to me, is not just an institution and a building, but the church is the people of God. And so, I mean, you begin to think through what's the role of the church in our culture right now, that really caused me to start to think, well, what's my role in our culture right now?
Mhm.
I mean, the church is me in a sense. And so I just started to think a lot about the places that God was calling me to and the purposes he had for my life. Uh, and he just really kind of led me in the direction of saying, hey, instead of just being in a school and teaching, maybe you should try to use this gift and this passion for athletics in a bigger way. And
Mm.
so that was the start of the NCSAA, the National Christian School Athletic Association. And again, it started very small. It just started with, honestly, it started with, let's see if we have enough money for 3 months to just get
Mhm.
by and I don't have to have a job for 3 months and we'll try this. And once we got to the end of 3 months and we did a lot of networking and relationship building with Christian schools and got a concept and a vision in place, it became like, well, let's see if we have enough money for the next 6 months to be able to make this happen. And,
Mhm.
3 months became 6 months, became a year, and became, 20 some years now of
Yeah.
being able to kind of do this work that God's led us to do. And so, yeah, it started very organically, just out of a desire to follow the passions that God had given me and the gifts that He had given me, and just seeing how He might use those. And so now it's grown into this Christian school organization of 500 plus member schools all over the
Wow.
country
Mhm.
that we get together and have all these really cool tournaments all throughout the course of the year. And in a sense, it's bridged the gap between my involvement in Christian schools and now my involvement in homeschooling,
Yeah.
homeschool coaching, because I had a background in all of this stuff with coaching at a Christian schools,
Yeah.
and I had a now an opportunity to coach here. And yet some of the same relationships have carried over, the experience of coaching in and understanding Christian education and Christian schools, still the desire to serve these Christian schools. And
Yeah.
now NCSAA has become an organization that really a number of Christian homeschool groups are a part of.
Yeah.
They attend a lot of these tournaments that are members of the organization. And so it's been a really kind of cool way to meld those two things together.
Yeah. And I love how, you had this background and then God's been able to use that to benefit, the homeschooling community as well as the Christian schools, just like bringing education back to
Yeah.
the roots and foundation in God, which is something that is so lacking. And I have been actually getting really into this now. You talked about the role of the church, and my focus has been the role of the church in education, especially with this whole like college. This is very off topic, but the college alternatives for people who don't want to go to college if they still want to be connected to a community of young people. I'm like, that's where the church can come in a lot in producing that.
Yeah.
But also, just what is our role in providing education for people, Christian education that don't necessarily have the economic means to homeschool or whatever it should be. I just think that's interesting that you had the same kind of thoughts
Yeah, it
for
really is.
athletics.
And honestly, I love that concept of like the definite education is a really fuzzy word sometimes
Hmm.
because we think of and we use the word education to mean schools and academic education, but there are so many kinds of education,
Yeah.
so many
Hmm.
things that educate us and teach us. I was talking with a friend recently because my daughter had gone on a trip recently, like an outdoor education kind of trip. And I mean, again, that's a form of education.
Exactly.
Like
Hmm.
going and hiking in the mountains is a form of education.
Hmm.
And so there are so many things that fall under that umbrella of what it means to have education and then have a Christian education that
Hmm.
challenges us to be closer in our relationship with God. So all of these things, I think of sports as an extension of education.
Yes.
So when we
Yeah.
talk about homeschooling, it's not like, hey, here's the schooling we do during the day and that's education, and then we go and play sports. I always think of those things as one big thing that fall
Hmm.
under the umbrella of education.
Yeah, it's the breaking of the compartmentalization of schools, which is what we've been submerged in for the past 100 years. Is that everything has a place, a different room, different compartment, different time, and they're not connected. When in fact, education is everything. It's educating the whole student, and that involves. I love how you said that it's just an extension of the school day, the track practice that we have,
Yeah.
and I think sports has taught me, specifically track, so much that I've never learned in the classroom, but it's been so necessary for me to learn, and it helps me in my schoolwork as well. So it affects both in a very positive way. But just persevering through really hard things, showing up every day when you don't want to show up, it's that sort of thing. The
All you people who
teamwork
are
too.
listening to this need to know that when Nadine says participate, like persevering through really hard things, what she really means is continuing to run around the track when her
Yeah,
mile running coach is yelling at her to keep going.
yeah.
She's tired. So everybody just read between the lines here. I know what she's talking
Distance running, yes, is
about.
makes me persevere a lot. But yeah, but I think also the teamwork. I love homeschoolers getting involved in some sort of activity that involves teamwork because it's such a unique environment to have a team. I loved that experience in Plants and Pillars, and I encourage other homeschoolers to like even speech and debate. That's still a team. Like if you don't have sports near you, you don't have a desire to do sports or whatever. But I find that really really amazing for homeschoolers too. But
One of the things I've seen that has been really awesome too is just being able to see that community that's built carry through from activity to activity.
mhm,
So you have plenty of like people who, hey, we get to know and get connected to this uh, community through the academic co-op, but then we want to play sports, and I've never played a sport before,
mhm,
but I think I'm going to go do it because the rest of my community is doing it, and I want to be with them.
yeah,
And so, how beautiful it's been to see people experience a new thing
mhm,
in athletics that is unfamiliar to them, but then they grow through that experience, but they're able to do it within the context of a team and a community of people that they know that care about them
yeah,
and love them and are going to encourage them through it. You talk about that like there are other activities in speech and debate and theater and all of these
mhm,
kinds of things that kids who are involved in the athletic portion of it think, oh, there's a play? Okay, I
yeah,
think maybe I'll go try to be a part of this play. I don't know how
mhm,
to act, and this makes me really nervous. but it's really neat to be able to
Yeah.
see the community function in that way. Like because we're a part of this vibrant community, now we're challenged to give other things a try
Mhm.
that are outside of our comfort zone. And yet that community kind of carries you through those difficult or hard things to learn, just because you know these people and you trust these people and they give you the encouragement to try something new and
Yeah.
different. And to me, that's the beauty of, again, call it a team, call it a family, call it
Yeah.
friends, whatever you want to call that, it's community.
I love that so much. It does illustrate Plants and Villas in such a beautiful way because you were talking about a friend of mine. We've been trying to convince her to do track for so long, and I think it was finally like our community around her. She wanted to be part of it, and she ended up loving it because of her friends and her community that was a part of it. And we encouraged her to do it,
Yeah.
and I'm
And
so glad
truly,
she
call
did.
that whatever you want to call it.
Yeah,
Call it friends, family, community, but it's just the body of Christ. It's people
exactly.
like interacting with each other, using their gifts in a way that builds
Hmm.
each other up, and that's not all the same gift, as we talk
Hmm.
about the body of Christ. It's not all the athletes. The body of Christ isn't made up of athletes. It's not made up of performers. It's not made up of, it's made up of people who have all of these different gifts and abilities, and everyone is valuable in that. And I think you see that play out in this type of community in
Yeah.
such an awesome way.
And I love to see the parents start other things too. Like with the community, they're like, okay, well, we have enough kids. Let's put on a play or let's start a volleyball team or whatever. Like it just continues to expand. And like you said, different people with different gifts get involved and then just gets bigger and people try different things. I don't know. It's so cool to watch it expand like that.
Well,
And
and I think it's been cool to see, especially from somebody who was involved at the ground level at the athletic
exactly.
program.
Yeah.
Because at the beginning, it sort of had to be like, okay, the few of us who are doing this, we have to do it all. So, like, if there's going to be this, we
Hmm.
have to start that. If there's going to be this, we have to start that. And it's been neat to see other extensions of sports starting. We had no vision of starting a volleyball team. We really didn't have any intention to start a volleyball team
Hmm.
because we thought, I don't know, do we have enough people that we can pull this all off? And so, the incentive to start a volleyball team and that growth in that area started because other people had a passion for that.
Yeah.
And so those of us who started the other stuff thought, whoa, something new started and we didn't have to
We
do
have to do
that.
it. Yeah.
It's just, and so really, to your point, I think it's beautiful and really has been a lot of fun for us to watch
Hmm.
new pieces come into play just because of the passion and the giftedness of other people.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think it was a cool part of your story that the community of parents who are homeschooler wanted to give their kids the sports opportunity. And I think also or something I've discovered about homeschooling is it really is, the responsibility of the parents, especially when the kids are younger, to provide opportunities for kids when they homeschool, because that's when the kind of isolation or the antisocial like, stereotypes come from homeschoolers is the parents that don't make you know a, a trade-off or more of a trade-off than a sacrifice to get kids involved in different things, and it can be hard. Do you have any advice for parents who are struggling with that, starting out with something new?
Yeah, I would just say this is going to sound really simplistic, but my answer is just try it.
Hmm.
I can't tell you how many families we've talked to, especially in the athletic context, where they say, "Oh, I wish we had tried this years ago. I wish we had started this before, because we've
Yeah.
loved it. It's been so good for our family in so many ways." There's not a whole lot of risk in trying something for a short period of time. If you try something and it doesn't work for you,
Yeah.
you can always go a different direction. That was even in the area of NCSAA, that was our attitude first. Like, look, we feel like God's leading us in this direction. And if we try it and the money runs out or it doesn't work, then okay, we tried it. So there's not a whole lot of risk in trying, even though it feels risky and it feels intimidating sometimes. Um, my advice is just give it a try. If you feel
Hmm.
like there could be some blessing for your kids or your families in this area, just try it.
Yeah.
And most of the time, in my experience, at least in homeschooling and in homeschooling sports, most of the time the experience of families has been, oh, I'm so happy we tried that.
Hmm.
It was so different than we thought it was going to be. We thought it was going to be overwhelming. We thought we weren't going to be able to do it. We thought our kids didn't have the right set of skills. We thought it was going to be too demanding. You know, all of those things. It was thought it was going to take up too much of our family's time, whatever those things are. We thought we weren't equipped to do it.
Hmm.
And then you get in the midst of it and you realize, oh, that was so different than what I thought it was going to be. And I'm so happy we tried it.
Yeah.
So I think it's my advice is just that simple. Just
Hmm.
try it.
Just do it. Yeah. I think that has so much power too. I mean, how many times I've said, I wish I would have done this sooner. I wish I would have done that. It's just fear that
Me too,
keeps me from
Nadine.
doing
Me
things. Yeah.
too.
Hmm. So we heard this story one time about homeschooling because I hear a lot of parents say, "Oh, I don't know if I'll do enough, or if I'm equipped to do this, or whatever." And um, it's the feeding of the 5,000. Like we bring to Christ what we can, and then He uses that to multiply. Ultimately for His glory. But He can take what we have, as meager as it is, and then really do something amazing. We have just no idea what exists on the other side of just taking, just doing it, taking the first step towards that direction. So I always love that analogy, not analogy, but just the comparison of the stories in a
Yeah.
very powerful way. Hmm.
Oh, it is very awesome. And I think there's so much truth in that too. Uh, Again, that's the whole hesitancy that's in us, right? Like
Hmm.
we're so hesitant because we realize our own weaknesses, our own shortcomings, which
Hmm.
are very real things. But God doesn't work, uh, God isn't limited by our weaknesses. He
Hmm.
says, where you are weak, I will be strong.
Hmm.
And so, I mean, in some ways, I look at my own life and I think the places where I'm weak, I should be even more willing to risk because God
Hmm.
says He wants me in a place of my weakness so that He can show me how strong He is and He can work. And so, yeah, I think that's a great truth to be able to carry through, encouraging people to be willing to be in a place where they feel weak.
Mm. Yeah, that's when He does His greatest works, and we look
Yeah.
back and we think, "Wow, that was pretty cool
Yeah,
to watch that."
things that again, I think we tend to think of our lives as if we control them,
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
so I think when we're in places where we're weak, we can't even imagine what God might do in that place because we think we have to do it, and so it is awesome to be in those places where we're weak and we realize God did something. Of course, it's going to be above and beyond our expectations
Hmm.
because our expectations for ourselves are we're weak, we can't do that. So when we can, I often say, being in a place of risk is actually the safest place you can be. Because when I'm in a place where I'm not risking, I feel like I have control over it.
Yeah.
And that's actually the riskiest place for me to be, is
Hmm.
be in a place where I feel like I'm trying to control my own life. But if I'm willing to put myself in a place of risk, that's the place where like I've completely put myself in God's hands, and that's the
Hmm.
safest place to be. The
Yeah.
place of risk is actually the safest place to be.
It's a place of full trust
Yeah.
because you can't trust your own self. I love
Yeah.
that too. Yeah. It's a powerful way to change your perspective whenever you're facing something difficult. Instead of kind of closing down and thinking like that's what I tend to do is I can't do this. Like I close down on myself because I know I can't without any help. So being able to see outside, well, this is actually exactly where I should be, and it's the safest place for me. It's such a change in mindset, which is, I mean, I think that's what sports has taught me the most is my mindset has so much power over how I perform and how I impact other people. Like that is such a powerful thing to try to work on in yourself to change your mindset to
Yeah.
honor
I mean,
God
how
more.
much time did we spend through this last season talking about mindset and talking about mental
Yes.
approach and those kinds of things?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's something that sports has really been good for me because I've
And
always
you
had
and
trouble
you
with that.
feed off of each other and you
Hmm.
thrive off of each other in that. I've watched a lot of you guys do that, in the sense of like, hey, I'm realizing that a lot of this is my mentality and my mindset approaching this.
Hmm.
And so to your point, that really does impact other people because as you are able to start to talk about that and think through that in a community, it challenges other people to realize, oh, I'm struggling with that too.
Yeah.
And so I think it's a means of being able to encourage each other when we share our own weakness.
Hmm.
When you're in a setting where you can share your weakness and grow in that with other people, it really does impact other people around you as you're going through that.
Yeah, yeah, and then you can challenge each other to be better than your own weaknesses. And I think it's important also that Plants and Pillars was a place where I felt comfortable sharing that with other people because I knew they wanted the best for me. And in sports also, I think the only way to be better is to admit that you're not at the place you want to be because then you know where to start working on from
And
there.
isn't
And
that a funny thing?
yeah.
Because none of us are where we could be.
Hmm.
None of us have reached our ceiling or our potential or whatever you want to call that.
Yeah.
And yet it takes a while for people to get comfortable enough to admit that, even though
Hmm.
it's the obvious truth.
Yeah, true, very true. Yeah, so that was probably the main lesson I'm still learning, obviously, but that I worked through this season with I think with everyone on the team. Honestly, I saw that a lot. And then we talked a little bit about how homeschoolers can get involved with NCSAA. Do you have quite a few homeschool teams
Yeah, we
on?
really do. And a lot of it centers around opportunities to participate in the tournaments because you hear from a lot of homeschooling teams that say, like, we're not a part of a league, we're not a part of a
Mm,
conference, we have a team. How do we get games? How do we
yeah.
get people to be willing to play against us? How do we find more opportunities to go compete? And so a lot of a lot of schools, homeschool groups, teams have said, hey, can we come be a part of your events? And I think they're often turned away from a lot of other events because they don't
Mm,
fit the mold of, hey,
yeah.
if we're a school league, I don't know, does a homeschool team fit into the mold we want them to fit into? And homeschoolers don't fit into any mold.
No, we don't.
Anyway, I think it's been a great place for us just to be able to welcome the homeschooling community and teams and say, look, we think you're a great fit competitively with the different school teams that we have. You add something in terms of numbers to our events.
Hmm.
And it's another group that we very easily can serve and offer something to. So it has been really neat. We've had every year at all of these events, soccer, volleyball, basketball tournaments, and the track meet, we have a lot of homeschool teams that
Hmm.
come out to participate in those alongside the Christian school teams. And honestly, they've been a great fit. Some people don't. Some schools come to that the first time and go, "Oh, you've got homeschool groups here, huh?" And they don't quite understand. And then it doesn't take
Hmm.
long till they realize, "Oh, yeah, this is a perfect fit. It
Hmm.
really is. It's a perfect
Yeah.
fit." And we're able to serve each other. And again, that whole model of iron sharpens iron and competition,
Hmm.
we're able to offer that to both communities.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's been a really cool thing. It's been neat. And so we have a lot of homeschool participation in those different events and the things that we do.
Yeah. So when a homeschool team joins, if there's anyone listening, possibly who I think I've mentioned a few people in the past, and I've told them I was going to do this episode. So if they were looking to get involved, what kind of opportunities would and you touched upon this, but what kind of
Well, again,
opportunities
the
would they have?
biggest thing is the tournaments. So it gives you a
Hmm.
great opportunity if you're a homeschool team out there. It gives you a great opportunity to have a place to go and compete at what feels like a larger scale event
Yeah.
with other teams and schools. A lot of these tournaments we have, like for instance, our basketball tournament in the winter. I think we had 160 some teams from
Wow.
30 different states or something like that come to participate in this. We're at a
Yeah.
big facility, college facility, and things. So I think it's the type of event that isn't, and again, was our motivation in starting these tournaments. It was the type of event that didn't exist for Christian schools.
Yeah.
And really the type of event that doesn't really exist for homeschool teams to go
Hmm.
participate in. So those are the kind of things, just an opportunity to go compete with a lot more teams and in a bigger scale event that we've spent a lot of years trying to fine tune and figure out how to make it a great, season ending type experience for your team, like as a culmination to your season. And at the same time, to really make the focus of attending these events an ability to challenge teams and athletes in their relationship with Christ. And what does
Hmm.
it mean to be a Christian and compete in sports and to build in team building opportunities for those teams as they travel away and go to these events together? Build those
Yeah.
kinds of things into the events. So a lot of it is the competition in the tournaments, but we do have some pieces in the organization. We do a set of uh, for lack of a better word, devotional kind of booklets or programs that teams can use throughout the course of their season. So, whereas a lot of teams have a coach that really wants to like make the season challenging for their athletes in their relationship with Christ, they realize it takes a lot of time to pull together a daily devotions and those
Yeah.
kinds of things. We have a whole program. It's called the Wellspring of Life Initiative that is set up to help provide for coaches through a fall season, a winter season, and a spring season, and actually like a 4-year rotation of that,
Wow.
so that there are like 12 different biblical disciplines that we have these programs developed for. So people don't have to repeat in their high school years if they play a sport in every season. You don't have to repeat the discipline that's focused on. We also have a set of like All-American and super regional teams as like a recognition program.
Mm.
A lot of these states, if you attend a public high school, have like an all-state team that you can qualify for at the end of the season or those types of things. So we have a really neat program we do to offer recognition for kind of like the top athletes in Christian schools in different regions of the country and those kind of things. So that has become a meaningful part of those teams' programs and a neat encouragement to kids throughout the year. And some other awards too that aren't just quality of performance as an athlete awards. We have some servant leadership awards and things like that. The teams are
Yeah.
able to then draw in and use as a part of their program to just kind of flesh out what their program. And so I think for homeschool teams, that's a great thing too, because it's
Yeah.
just some extra resources that you can say these already exist over here, this organization that we're a part of, which by the way, for anybody listening, you can be a part of and you don't have to pay anything to be a member of NCSAA. Like they're just we want to serve schools and we want to
Mhm.
serve teams and we want to serve kids and families and communities. And so I think in a lot of ways we just want to offer resources which are then there for these groups to be able to pull
Yeah.
in as a part of how they're serving their communities.
And that's just so nice to have that option because it what definitely was a void that you guys filled for sure. Because I think I talked with a few of members of my team, and they said that their favorite part, of sports has been these tournaments, like traveling with their teams and just having that experience that is a part of conventional schooling, I think. That's one of the big things that everyone feels like they're missing out on if there's anything. And so having that organization that you guys have built that gives that opportunity is just such a blessing, I think.
Yeah, just been
Yeah.
and it's been a cool thing to work within. One of the things you asked me is like, how have you benefited
Mm-hmm.
from being a part of coaching or being a part of these teams? And I think as are most things in life, when you have an opportunity to serve, you have blessings multiplied upon you from your opportunity to do it. You
Mm-hmm.
ask about any homeschooling parent, uh, what do you think how do you think your kids benefited from this opportunity? And
Yeah.
they often will say, I think I benefited more than my kids did. I learned more, and what was returned to me from having this experience with my kids or learning in the midst of the things I was teaching them has been so big in my own life. And I would say the same thing from coaching. I mean, people talk about, oh, this is great. You guys have filled this void and created this opportunity for others to benefit. And yet I would say the amount of benefit that I've taken from that is just huge. And most of that is just relationships, right? In our
Mm-hmm.
lives, we benefit so much from relationships. So the opportunities that I've had to serve, to have relationships with the people that I've coached with, to have relationships with the kids that I've had the opportunity to coach,
Mm-hmm.
to have relationships with the teams that we've competed against and the coaches of other teams. Again, those are all extensions of this community that we talk about.
Yeah.
So again, being involved in and in the midst of this community, I think has blessed me uh, extraordinarily in ways that, I have plenty of people come at the end of any season and say, thank you so much for giving your time. And I just want to say to families, thank you so much for sending your kids here
Mm.
to compete this year because that was all such a big blessing in my year.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think also with any group of, I don't know, large group of Christian schools, homeschoolers, or whatever it may be, being reminded you're not alone in this like different path that we're taking is also so important. Something I didn't think would ever, I didn't think would be something that would come from a large gathering of Christian schools or homeschoolers, and that's something I experienced at the first track meet. I think the first championship that we participated in, I remember thinking, oh my goodness, like there's other homeschool teams, like we're not the only one. Sometimes I don't know, I didn't think about that there might be others. And so I loved that relationship that we were able to immediately have with the
Mhm.
other teams we met. And you never think that those things will benefit you in the way that they do. So I love that you recognize, the relationships that you built have blessed you as much as they've blessed the community. It's just such a cool thing. You just kind of have to take that step, that first step to just starting it.
Just
Yeah.
try it.
Hmm.
Just try it.
So, if someone may be interested in joining, is what would be the best way to go about that?
Yeah. Well, let me give you both parts of that. And the easiest way to do that is website and like Facebook groups and
Okay.
that kind of stuff. So the easiest way to find NCSAA is you just go to ncsaa.org. We have a website and there's all kinds of contact information on there. And
Mhm.
again, homeschool groups are more than welcome to be a part of this. I think sometimes they see the organization and think, oh, this is just for Christian schools, and very much it encompasses both Christian schools and homeschool groups, and we'd love to
Mm.
have you be a part of it. On the Plants and Pillars side of things for athletics, we have a great Plants and Pillars homeschool athletics Facebook page, and that's really the best landing spot
Mhm.
and place to find us is look online for that.
Yeah, and I think also it's open to other homeschoolers outside of
Yes,
just the Plants and Billies.
yes,
Like you said,
absolutely. Yeah.
it's
And
a
that's the
sense of
neat thing
movement.
we've been able to have. We've had so many different co-ops and groups and just homeschoolers in the
Yeah,
community do it and say, can we be a part of this? And yes, the answer is yes.
the more the merrier. Come
Yes,
because our team is
absolutely. Bigger
huge.
community. And
Yeah.
really, it has grown a lot. And so that's been part of the beauty of it is seeing the growth of
Mhm.
the community and the diversity of the community.
Yeah. Yeah. I love how big our team is and how wonderful it is to have this big congregation of homeschoolers and just
Yeah.
run together. It's just so fun. Um, and then also, I'm biased to the homeschool groups whenever they come to like the track meets and they just dominate. I'm like, yes. But I'm obviously it's just because I'm biased, but it's fun to watch that as well. And then I think finally I'll just end. I always ask for advice at the end of every episode. So, what's your best piece of advice for homeschool families in general?
Wow, there's a lot. That's a big question, Nadine.
Yeah, it is. It is a big question.
Um, I think probably I don't know if this falls under the category of advice, but I'm going to couch it as that anyway.
Mhm.
And that is just realize the man, the huge blessing that it is in homeschooling to have those years with your kids.
Mhm.
I think, I mean, I went to a Christian school the whole time through as I was growing up. And uh, it's funny, my family doesn't always understand what we're doing when we're homeschooling. You know, my mother, while we're telling mom stories, my mother sometimes, as we started homeschooling, would worry, like, okay, what are you doing? You're not
Mhm.
going to school. You're teaching your kids at home. It was like, for people who haven't homeschooled before, it's a very foreign thought.
Yeah.
Don't quite know what it's all about. So I think sometimes, again, this may be not being advice, but more just reassurance to people who are considering homeschooling that the blessing and the benefit that is on the other side is just astronomical. The experience that our family has had being able to spend these years so closely
Mhm.
together because we did schooling together at home. Um, the opportunities, especially that my wife has had to spend that time with our kids.
Yeah.
But then, in a sense, because my work is largely at home, the opportunity that I've had to be able to spend a certain amount of time and have certain experience with my kids that I wouldn't have had if they were at school
Mhm.
is just such a big blessing. And again, like you said, it's not for everybody. Not everybody can or does make that decision.
Mhm.
Um, but I would just say to people who are considering this, just from the perspective of somebody who's been through it for a lot of years now,
Mhm.
don't underestimate the blessing that choosing homeschooling can be for your family.
Yeah. And I think that's the main difference between like a Christian school and homeschool is the family. You know, you're still separated from your family for a lot of time, your whole childhood pretty much. And with home education, it's just something very, very unique in the family relationships that come from that. That's probably been my favorite part of homeschooling is just how close my family is, and that time we didn't lose in that way and still got the Christian based education as well. So it's just a different um thing, but it's been so wonderful. I'm biased to it.
Yes, very
Yeah.
much. I think we both speak from that perspective, but I think
Hmm.
it's valuable for
Yeah.
others to hear who haven't had you know, the experience yet.
Yeah, because it
Maybe
is.
are a little bit wary.
Yeah, it's very foreign idea in our culture today, just the idea of being home educated. We got a lot of questions from our family. I think we were the first in the family to homeschool, so that's always the fun. We paved the way for everyone else,
Yeah,
but we get a lot of
absolutely.
questions for sure. All right. I think that's about everything, unless you have anything else.
I think that's it. This was pretty fun.
Yeah,
And hey,
thank you.
let me just say this. Let me just say thank you to you for the work that you do. I think you've been a really good ambassador for homeschooling, and it's been fun to watch what you've done through this podcast. And so I just want to say thanks for all your efforts and for inviting so many people into this conversation. It's been really cool.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much. And thank you for being part of it.
Yep, no problem.
So that is it for episode number 49. Thank you guys so much for listening to that episode, and big shout out to Coach Hartman for coming on the podcast and sharing his story, and for dedicating so much of his life to creating NCSAA and allowing homeschoolers into the program. We have benefited so much from it. And if you are looking to become involved in this organization, please check the link below. I have put all their information in the show notes. Come join NCSAA, and maybe I'll see you guys at the track and field championships this spring, which would be so awesome. And then if you have any questions regarding anything we talked about in the podcast, anything that you want to know more about, if you want me to connect you with Mr. Hartman, if you have any questions, please email me. As always, my email is linked below. And then here is the special announcement. I teased it last week. How to Homeschool in High School is undergoing a rebranding process that is being released. The rebrand is being launched on the 26th of July, or the 27th if I'm being realistic. And that is going to be, it's going to involve a new title, it's going to involve a new cover art, and in this episode, I'm going to go through and explain the reasoning behind the rebranding, what that really means, and you'll just have to stay tuned for the big surprise and the big reveal of the new name. I'm so excited, and I just wanted to put a little disclaimer in here that I always wanted to make sure that this podcast is as helpful to you guys as possible, and I do believe this change will make this podcast even more helpful to you. So that is a little teaser for Friday. You'll have to stick around to hear more information about that. But I also want to mention that I will be attending the Turning Point Academy's Educators Summit this week. And I'm going to bring you guys along on Instagram. So if you want to follow that journey, be sure to follow us on social media, Facebook and Instagram, for all that content that's going to be released this week. All right, guys. So thank you so much for listening to this episode and spending your time with us today. I hope you continue to stay fearlessly different. And as always, we'll see you all at the end of the week.